So the EU itself, according to a very reliable source who used to be a Satanist leader, is dominated by Satanists. The only satanic panic that occurs when these things happen is the Satanists panicking because they're about to be fully exposed.
Hey friends, that was Wilfred Wong, a nearly 3-decade veteran researcher of satanic ritual abuse. This is a blockbuster interview that I hope you will share far and wide. Before we begin, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. Friends, it's been about 1 month since wildfires started in California, Oregon, and now Seattle. And fires like these represent a real risk to the grid or potentially to your own home. And if you're ever in such a situation, you want to make sure you're as prepared as possible, which is why I have the solar water heater. The solar panels installed on the heater generate the electricity needed, so you never have to worry about wires or batteries when camping. It's lightweight, only 2.6 pounds, so you'll barely notice it in your backpack. It also comes with a 100% lifetime guarantee replacement. If you want your own solar water heater, please click the link. I'll leave it below this interview and use coupon code SGT15 to save 15% off. And welcome back, friends. Thank you so very much for tuning in. This is Sean from SGT Report, sgtreport.tv, and the YouTube channel, SGT Report. Thanks for finding us. I know how hard YouTube is making that these days. Hey guys, I have a very special report here for you. I have on the line Wilfred Wong, who has been investigating satanic ritual abuse for 27 years. His website is CASRA.org. That stands for Coalition Against Satanist Ritual Abuse, casra.org.uk. Wilfred, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I saw your interview with Sean Atwood, and I just had to get you on, so thanks for agreeing to come on. A subject as huge as this one almost leaves me ill-equipped with knowing where to begin, but just a little background. Me and my audience are very well versed in much of the areas that you study, all right? We know all about Jimmy Savile.
All the scraps, all the bones, all the hair. That's it.
We know about his relationship with Prince Charles. We know about Sir Edward Heath, who only after his death did the evidence come out in the mainstream media that he may have been involved in the murders of as many as 16 children in a satanic cult. Why don't you tell us how you got started in this area of research, and then we'll talk about the problem of Satanism in the UK and around the world.
Yes, I got involved in this issue 27 years ago in 1993 because I was involved in child protection campaigning and campaigning for children's rights, rights of children in different countries around the world. And a lot of my work, which God led me into, was a result of the fact that I used to be a lawyer, and then I felt led by God into work for children and also work for persecuted Christians around the world. And I was doing both for many years. And a parliamentarian who was also a Christian, an English member of parliament, knew the work I was doing. And when he was approached about SRA, he asked me to help him with this work. And I got involved. I was kind of thrown in at the deep end on this issue, although I had read about it before, and have stuck with it ever since, because it's so horrifying. You cannot know about it and not do anything about it or forget about it. That's my reasoning. Anyway, God called me into it, so I knew that this was my not only my calling, but you could say that it was living out the command by God to love our neighbor as ourselves and to be a good Samaritan to the victims of SRA, and not simply to look the other way. Although I know it's tempting for many to look the other way, but this is something, for those of us who live in the West, it's something right in our own backyard, and we need to pay attention to it. God also gave me the verse Ephesians 5:11 to expose the deeds of darkness, as well as Ezekiel chapter 8, which is about the leaders of ancient Israel who were secretly involved in worshiping demons. And God shows the prophet Ezekiel these facts, which the leaders of Israel thought were hidden from God. But of course, God knows everything. And we have a similar situation in the UK today, and I believe in many other countries like the US. You have leaders, people of influence throughout societies who are secretly involved in worshiping demons and the devil. And this is the reality we have in the UK, and this helps to explain why so many things are wrong in our society, and so many destructive things are being targeted at children, for children to learn in school. Children are basically being groomed by sex education in school. I refer to that as state-sanctioned grooming. And this is behind the agenda of the Satanists, which is not only to abuse children sexually, but also to corrupt them. So children need to be protected from the Satanists, both their bodies and their minds. But we can't do this if we don't expose SRA. And if we don't expose it, then people continue to live with the myth that SRA does not exist. And there is a saying among the Satanists that is quite common, which is the guarantee of our existence is the guarantee of our tomorrow is today's perception that we do not exist. And I do not want to guarantee the tomorrow of the Satanists. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think the mainstream media, certainly in the UK, but now I'm seeing it more and more in the United States as well, works together with these groups to try to suppress the news stories about satanic ritual abuse, to call it conspiracy theory, to say that they're very isolated and rare cases. How widespread is it in the UK? And then we'll talk about some specific cases, but in my view, it goes all the way to the top. I mean, Prince Andrew, Prince Philip, Prince Charles, the royals themselves, and the intelligence agencies. There's been cases of the heads of MI5 being implicated in some of this stuff. How widespread is it in the UK, in your view?
In my view, it is very widespread. And one indicator of this was a documentary on SRA that was shown many years ago in 1992. And 15 telephone helplines were set up for the documentary for SRA survivors who were, for example, triggered by watching the documentary or seeking help to call in to these 15 telephone helplines. And the broadcaster, which was Channel 4, one of our main channels in the UK, grossly underestimated the extent of SRA out in the UK, because British Telecoms, which is the main telephone company in the UK, said that although 191 calls came in after the documentary onto the helplines, they recorded 595 attempted calls in just the first 5 minutes of the helpline number appearing on screen, and 4,500 attempted calls in the helpline's first hour of operation after the documentary on SRA was shown. That is a huge number of SRA victims seeking help, 4,500 in just the first hour. And my understanding is that Channel 4 could not cope with the huge load of people calling in. And after a few days, they shut the helpline down. Not surprising, because we tend to underestimate just how serious this problem is, even when we accept that it exists. But it not only exists, it exists to a huge extent. The reason why it's managed to grow so much, and bearing in mind this was 1992 when the documentary was shown, they've had many more years to grow and expand because of inaction on this issue by the public and inaction on this issue by the authorities. So like a cancer, they've been allowed to just grow and spread. And the cases I get are from all over the country. And it never ceases to amaze me how they have managed to get into so many different places. I've even had a case of a church bishop who signs his name with an upside down cross next to it. He is a Satanist infiltrator and has the boldness to put this because he knows that a lot of the church are ignorant about Satanism and SRA, and many of them are willfully ignorant on this subject. So it's easy to just hide things in plain sight. I went into one of the churches that he oversees, and I was looking for hidden symbols of Satanism. And I looked below the desk of one of the people working in the church, who's a paid worker, and there was an upside-down cross, hidden in plain sight. You get the same in the City of London, which is the main financial district in Britain and one of the major financial districts of the world. You'll see upside-down crosses being displayed quite openly. Even taking my train here to use my friend's computer for this interview, I look out the window and I see an upside-down cross. So it is growing, and they are getting more bold, and they are getting more blatant. And unless we expose them publicly and listen to the victims of SRA and publicize what the victims are saying, it's going to be just constant and accelerating growth for Satanist influence in our societies. Yeah. And SRA will just continue to increase with more damaged children, more children's lives being ruined. Some children I know of from various cases I've dealt with experience such horrific torture and abuse, which is what SRA is. SRA is sex abuse and torture within just the first few years of their lives, and have to live with that, the scars of that for the rest of their life. And it's horrible way to begin one's life in this world. But that's the cruelty of SRA, and it's the cruelty of what Satanists do to people when they believe that they can get away with it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned child grooming, and I think that what we're seeing around the world, at least in the West, is society being prepped for more and more increasingly immoral images and behaviors and trying to destroy societal norms. Tom DeLay, a politician in the United States, warned us just a few years ago. He said he discovered a secret memo coming out of the Department of Justice where they wanted to mainstream 12 perversions, Wilfred, including bestiality and sex with children, right? So they want to mainstream this abhorrent behavior. And I guess what I want to ask you, before we even get into the area of Pizzagate, what we saw happening in Washington, D.C., and an investigation that went into areas of a pizza parlor. I just want to get your thoughts on that. But first, can we talk briefly about the Hampstead case in the UK? I interviewed the mother, Ella Draper.
But we now know that he's been attending school every day, and he was abusing children there, together with the teachers, the headmistress, the social services, and whoever were coming to school.
Wednesday is the most busiest day of sex, and today it's Wednesday, and if I was right now on Wednesday in school, they would have done lots and lots of sex to me. And Wednesday is the most sex day, and it's the most busiest day.
I found her to be 100% credible. And then I saw what the mainstream media did to her. Let's just take a look at this. Let me do a screen share. I'm sure you're well versed in this case. But what the media did to her is immediately call her evil and say that she tortured her children into making them fabricate these horrible stories about their father, Ricky Dearman, being involved in a satanic cult. But what I want people to understand is those children had very credible testimonies, and they were using language that I don't think little children would use unless they were abused. And then they provided drawings for the police of people said to be their abusers, people who had tattoos, horrific demon tattoos on their private parts, etc. This, in my view, Wilfred, would have been very easy to investigate and root out. But what happened was the authorities And certainly the mainstream media turned against the mother, protected the father, Ricky Dearman, propped him up with a softball interview on the UK's version of 60 Minutes, and then turned the kids back into the care of Ricky Dearman. I don't know if you've seen this spot, but this is an eBay commercial with Ricky Dearman and those two kids, Gabriel and Alicia.
Yeah.
And his name in this spot is Gab Williams. And he's being presented an award for some eBay sales award. So anyway, I just wanted to frame that up for the audience. What were your thoughts on the Hampstead case? Because if it's credible, it only supports exactly what you're saying about satanic ritual abuse in the UK.
Yes, I've also met and spoken with Ella Draper at length. She is no doubt very credible and very truthful, in my view. I've interviewed a lot of people over the last 27 years, and I would say that I've got a pretty good instinct for those who tell the truth and those who are not telling the truth. And Ella was definitely very factual and truthful. She was very clear about the satanic elements of the case and the Satanist ritual abuse that's involved in the case. It is the most well-known SRA case in the UK in recent history, which is all the more reason why the UK authorities were trying so hard to cover it up. Because if they had to accept that the Hampstead case was true, that would have blown the lid off decades of denial and cover-up regarding SRA, claims that SRA does not exist, claims that SRA is a myth, would have gone down the drain if the Hampstead case had been investigated, because it's so public. About 4 million people watched it on YouTube. The children's testimonies, when they first spoke about the satanic abuse that they were being put through.
Kafkas.
Who's Kafkas?
You know, there's people who work at Kafkas.
What is Kafkas?
Kafkas is they're for children. They work with the social services.
And what did they do to you?
They do sex. They touch each other. They touch me and Gabriel. They have plastic quillings and they stick it in our bottom.
Who does? Who sticks it in your bottom?
Social services. Everybody does. All of them.
Who?
Everybody.
Does your mother do it?
No.
Do I do it?
No.
Who does it then?
Papa, Mr. Holding, the school.
Who?
Parents.
My dad's
Tell me more
family.
people. Tell me some more people, please. I'm interested.
Parents, police.
What about the teachers at school? Who's the main one?
Papa, Mr. Hollings, Mrs. Forsyth.
Who's Mrs. Forsdyke?
She's the head teacher of our school.
And what does she do?
And she does sex. She got a big with a big tattoo on her pride.
And what happens in the church?
And we do baby sacrifice and eat the baby.
What do you mean sacrifice and eat the baby?
So we kill the baby and eat it and drink the blood from it.
Is that true, Gabriel?
Yes. And we dance with the skulls.
You what?
We dance with the skulls in the church.
What skulls?
Skulls of the baby.
Although they didn't use the phrase satanic abuse, you could tell from what they described, it was quite clearly satanic. And this was watched by about 4 million viewers, and this really frightened the UK authorities because they don't want the world to know that SRA goes on in the UK, and they certainly don't want the world to know that it's so widespread in the UK. So they had to put on a show, and the show was, oh, look, we've investigated, we found no evidence, and by the way, the mother, who was the chief whistleblower on behalf of her children, has to be totally discredited, and we have to eventually return the children to the abusive father just to convince the world there's nothing in this, everything's okay, and we can all basically forget about this case and present this facade to the world wrapped neatly with a bow after their so-called investigation, which only lasted 2 weeks, which is peanuts compared to any serious crime that needs to be investigated. Should normally be more than a month, but it was just 2 weeks. very, very superficial look at the case, so that they caused too much. Therefore, they had to bury it. Unfortunately, the tactic of blaming the whistleblowing parent and then giving the abused children, whether it's SRA or child sex abuse, back to the serving the children back to their abusive parent, like giving a lamb to a wolf, is very common in the UK. Because what we have had is the infiltration of the UK police and social services and family courts by the Satanists, so that I've come across a lot of different cases, just like Ella's, where the non-abusive parent goes to the police asking for help, and then social services gets involved, blames the parent for supposedly making up the abuse allegations, takes the child away from the whistleblowing parent, and eventually gives the child back to the abusive parent. This has happened many times, not just with Ella Draper. The difference with Ella Draper was that it was so well publicized over the internet, and because of the publicity also making it into the mainstream media. Unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream media has also been infiltrated. I have names of journalists who are themselves involved in SRA. I know certain newspapers are notorious for attacking anyone who tries to publicly expose SRA, and those include the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, which you showed on screen just now, attacking Ella. They have a long track record of this. There are some good newspapers, a minority of good newspapers who will talk about SRA, such as the Daily Express and the Sunday Express, and also the Sunday People. By the way, the Daily Express were the Sunday Express were the only ones who ran articles, 3 articles in total, about Jimmy Savile being involved in SRA. But a lot of the mainstream media have become just a mouthpiece or propaganda tool for the Satanists, unfortunately. And this shows you how powerful they are growing, their ability to control information, which is why it's so important that we have people like yourself who can put the truth out there on the alternative media. This is something that the Satanists have not been able to deal with effectively yet. But let's use this space of freedom while we still can to expose them, and hope and pray that they never are able to shut it down. So what we had was a classic cover-up, Satanist style, with the collusion of the police and the social services. This is sadly not a one-off, and it continues to happen. I've heard some reports that child protective services in the USA are just as bad, but I haven't been approached about any of the US cases yet. The fact is that it is an old strategy that has been used by the Satanists and continues to be used, and is not growing any less, but growing more in frequency. But yeah, we need to publicize the facts of the Hampstead case to keep the case alive and to expose the cover-up. Because until we expose what's really going on publicly and extensively, the Satanists will just continue to grow from strength to strength. I always stress that every time you expose SRA publicly, you are helping to protect children from these horrific evils. That's why the more that we can expose it, the better.
So you live with your mum?
Yes.
And do you ever get to see your dad, do you?
My dad, Ricky.
Ricky, do you ever get to see him?
Every 2 Saturdays, but actually, in fact, he lies to my mum, and he says that he just sees us every 2 Saturdays.
And do you see him every 2 Saturdays?
Orders.
Okay.
So
do you see him every 2 Saturdays?
Nope. We see him every single day.
Every single day? And how do you do
school, that? He comes to our school.
Oh, does he? And what does he do at the school?
He does sex to us. He kills babies there.
Right.
We eat babies. we drink their blood.
Okay.
Because this is how we do it. So like on Wednesdays is the most special, busiest days, special day.
Okay.
Well, look, I brought up the Hampstead case because every time I do, there are people out there, people that enjoy this content, enjoy my channel, that will leave comments saying, oh, that whole thing was debunked. The mother was crazy. She made it all up. I want to just reinforce the fact that in my interview with her, she could not have been more credible. I believe her to this day, and I do believe that those children ended up with the wrong parent, which happens so often in these cases. And that poor woman had to flee the country because not only was she being persecuted by the Mockingbird mainstream horror media in the UK, I think they wanted to prosecute her. They actually wanted to go after her criminally when all she wanted to do was save her kids. Now, this is what people are up against when it comes to this topic. And Wilfred, what really alarms me, let me do another screen share. Are you familiar with QAnon?
Yes.
Okay, well, QAnon has now been officially condemned by the politicians in the United States government. They've condemned in a congressional move, literally the other day, they had a vote on condemning QAnon and QAnon rhetoric. Well, Q posts things like this. This is an image of Hillary Clinton doing an interview, and tell me this happens by accident, Wilfred. The second book down on the stack is a book, a pictorial by Lucio Bababko, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but it's filled with satanic imagery, demons having sex, gay sex with each other, etc. And that book was obviously placed there purposely. And the reason I bring it up is because in the WikiLeaks drops, there were many John Podesta emails that used what appeared to be coded language, which suggests that there may have been pedophilic activities happening with John Podesta, who's so closely connected to the Clintons and has been for years. So let's just put that in the sidebar. That's one issue I want to talk to you about, is how high up does this go around the world? Because if we circle back to the UK and Sir Edward Heath, if Sir Edward Heath was involved in a satanic cult and potentially was involved in the murders of as many as 16 children, then this, by very definition, goes all the way to the top. Sir Edward Heath was a prime minister who had one-on-one time regularly with the Queen. I mean, it just leaves me kind of speechless when you realize how in the grip of evil some of these politicians may be. Your thoughts on any of that?
Yes, definitely. Sir Edward Heath was definitely involved in satanic ritual abuse. Within just a month or two of me starting on working on SRA in 1993, I was already made aware of Edward Heath's involvement in SRA. And he was still alive at the time, and he had a very high position within the parliament and respected position because of his former prime ministership. He was the prime minister just before Margaret Thatcher. He was also the prime minister who brought the UK into the European Union, or European Economic Community as it was known at that time in the 70s. The EU, dominated by Satanists with all its power and influence, a lot of political leaders involved in Satanism. If you want to look at some, it's not an exhaustive list, some of the political leaders involved in Satanism, Google the RAINS list, R-A-I-N-S list. It has a list of many parliamentarians, including Edward Heath, who were involved in Satanist ritual abuse, according to SRA survivors. I know the lady who created that list. Her name was Dr. Joan Coleman. She was an English psychiatrist who treated SRA survivors over a period of about 30 years. And they shared all sorts of information with her about influential people, so-called VIPs, involved in SRA. And she devised this system where if two SRA survivors who did not know each other both shared the same name with her, that name would go on her list, and that became the RAINS list. But it is not an exhaustive list. There are many other names. who ought to be on the list but are not, either because Dr. Joan Coleman did not meet the sources of information, or because she did not update the list. She, in fact, shared with me some other names when I interviewed her in person, which have not been added to that list, at least not so far, because the list has not been regularly updated. But that list is enough to show you that there are quite a lot of people in influential positions involved in SRA, not only in the parliament, but in journalism, basically influencing the media's coverage of this issue, or rather the non-coverage of this issue. And we get a kind of a glimpse of the people in influence on this subject. The Satanists are known to actually tell their followers what jobs they should be taking in society because of its strategic value to the Satanist agenda. So, for example, I looked up the London chapter of the Satanic Temple, which originated in the USA. And in the USA, they're very well known for trying to get Satanism mainstreamed in US society. I don't for a second believe their claim that they don't believe in the devil. They use all the same imagery as Satanists do, who do believe in the devil. They're just using this as a kind of an excuse so that they can get mainstream acceptance. And I've also seen a film of the Satanists of the Satanic Temple doing their ritual, and they were just doing it same as other Satanists would. Anyway, I look at the London chapter of the Satanic Temple's Facebook account, and I put the cursor of my mouse over the picture of the Baphomet and the Satanist pentagram they had displayed, and up pops a box about the leader of the London chapter, whose name is Ali Bushell, and the fact that she worked, and maybe still works, in the UK Ministry of Justice and the UK Department for Education, two areas which Satanists would obviously be very interested in: law enforcement and education of children. Mm-hmm. They are targeting our children, not just their bodies, but also their minds. They have been allowed to have practically a free reign in our society, in the UK and probably in the USA as well, through our inaction, including the inaction of the church. And this has allowed them to get into many different influential levels of society, including politics. They have been able to get into the highest levels of politics, I believe. I have no doubt that the Clintons are involved in Satanism. And I have no doubt that Edward Heath was probably not the only Prime Minister of the UK involved in Satanism and SRA. So this is the rather disturbing picture we have today. It's not too late. We can still expose all this and help put a stop to it by exposing it. But we should not be simply taking at face value all the claims that SRA doesn't exist. In the UK, at least, we have at least 10 successfully prosecuted SRA cases where the SRA evidence was openly shared in court and was believed and accepted. Otherwise, the defendants would not have been successfully prosecuted. And that means that the evidence of the SRA in those cases was accepted to satisfy the very high standard of proof that is required in the UK criminal courts, similar to the USA. And that standard is the standard of beyond reasonable doubt. So I can say with all certainty that SRA has been proved to exist in the UK beyond reasonable doubt. I would suggest that if you don't have a similar list in the USA, then you put a list together of all the successfully prosecuted SRA cases where SRA was openly shared in the courts. This SRA evidence was openly shared in the courts and not suppressed. The second clear evidence we have of SRA in the UK is that the Metropolitan Police, which is the largest police force in the UK and the oldest police force in the UK, have openly acknowledged and publicly acknowledged on their website that satanic abuse exists. So that is not a small thing. That is a leading police force, the leading police force in the UK. By the way, they are also the police force that was supposed to investigate the Hampstead SRA case. So they are by no means good at investigating SRA, but at least they have publicly acknowledged that it exists. They still have a long way to go to actually properly investigate these cases.
Do you think people in the UK are finally waking up? I think there's been a great awakening around the world regarding child sex trafficking and SRA, satanic ritual abuse. It really wasn't talked about very much 20 years ago. Even 10 years ago, nobody could have imagined how widespread a problem this was. Now, for those who were familiar with Jimmy Savile and understood his relationship with Prince Charles, I believe Jimmy Savile was the godfather to Prince Charles' sons. They were very close. He was knighted by the Queen, and I think there were always rumors that he was a pedophile, but he was protected by the BBC in his relationship with the royals. And it's been said that not only did he traffic in children, not only was he an abuser of children, even children with special needs, he was also into necrophilia. Now, explain to me, Wilfred, how that could all be covered up for so long if it's true.
Well, I believe it is true, and I've looked into the necrophilia point, and there are plenty of witnesses, and he even boasted to some people about his necrophilia, in private, of course, not publicly. Publicly, he admitted that he had a special interest in dead bodies. The problem I think we have in the UK anyway is that if someone is a celebrity, they are treated as if they have some kind of special privileges and protection, which strictly speaking should not be the case in a supposedly democratic society. But in practice, that's what helps to protect them. And the police are part of the problem. The police, I have seen reports by retired police officers who were involved in child protection, where the retired police officers, because they're now retired, they can speak more freely, say that they were told when a VIP was involved in a child protection case that they should basically back off. And they wanted to talk about it now, and they wanted to expose it more. And apparently dozens of these retired police officers who used to be in child protection were saying, you know, we want to basically make this more public. And this was reported in a London newspaper called the Evening Standard some years ago. The interesting thing about this article, which I have reproduced on my website, is that when you go to the newspaper website of the Evening Standard, they don't have that article. And that's very interesting because I think it probably ruffled a lot of feathers and they decided not to put it on their website. But I've reproduced it on my website, the CASRA website, just to show that there are some police officers who don't like these cover-ups just because people are VIPs or celebrities. The problem, and I've been saying this for many years, the problem is that if you have the right connections in the UK, you can abuse children, even torture them, and get away with it. Now, that's certainly not a democracy, is it? You know, we try to present to the world a nice picture of respecting human rights, democracy, etc., but in reality, if you've got the right connections, you can abuse and torture children, which is what SRA is, and still get away with it. And that is the thing we should be challenging. That is the thing that we should not be tolerating it. And by we tolerate it when we don't speak out. We tolerate it when we don't challenge this injustice. And we let the children just continue to be abused and tortured, not just by VIPs, but by others as well, because there are many other people who are just members of the public but involved in Satanism who are also getting away with it and allowed to get away with it by our silence. Unfortunately, that's the reality. I think you're beginning to uncover something like that in the United States as well. And my view is we need to put a stop to it now. We should have put a stop to it decades ago, but now is better than never. And the good news is that more people are starting to realize that this is happening. More members of the public are wanting to know about these things, know about these cover-ups, so-called conspiracy theories. Some people try to dismiss it. A lot of people try to dismiss it by calling them conspiracy theories. I know that some conspiracy theories are ludicrous, but there are also conspiracy theories that are true and are conspiracy facts. And the fact that SRA exists in the UK is a fact that has been acknowledged by the UK's largest police force on their website, and has been acknowledged by the fact that there are at least 10 successfully prosecuted SRA cases in the UK. But at the same time, are we willing to face up to this evidence and deal with the issue? The problem is too many people are too squeamish to face it, to deal with it. If you don't like what you see in SRA, then try and help put a stop to it. The worst thing you can do is to look the other way, because then you're just becoming part of the problem rather than part of the solution. The public is also becoming more distrusting of government and the authorities for various reasons, including all the recent lockdown and rules related to COVID-19. I think the public are starting to question, well, what are the authorities actually up to? Who's behind all this sudden deprivation of our freedoms, our liberties? What's really going on? The mainstream media isn't telling us all that we need to know. We need to look elsewhere. And so I've noticed that alternative media interviews on SRA are basically getting probably the highest number of views than they've ever got before, because public confidence, at least in the UK, in government and in the police is at an all-time low.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think people are waking up to the fact that spiritual warfare on this planet is very, very real. And many of these politicians, look, you mentioned City of London. When I think of the City of London, I think of the House of Rothschild. Yeah. And, you mentioned upside down crosses everywhere. Their symbology will be their downfall. That's one of the Q posts. They love symbolism. And people, I think, are waking up, Wilfred, to this idea that the end game for these people is a satanic one world government. Literally satanic. So yes. If we just go back real quickly to the Comet Ping Pong story, which CNN says was debunked, I just want to do a screen share and show you something. So James Alefantis, who was named the 49th most powerful man in Washington, D.C. by GQ magazine, who we're told is just a pizza shop owner, but he was tied, I guess, once dated or married to David Brock, a powerful Democrat operative. At any rate, because of the WikiLeaks Podesta emails, Comet Ping Pong was investigated by Anons, and they discovered Jimmy Comet's Instagram page. Okay, so these are some screenshots from James Alefantis, his Instagram account, and the name he used was Jimmy Comet. All right, so people wanted answers, okay? They just wanted to investigate. CNN says, nothing to see here, it's all been debunked. I want to show you this. If you type in kill room now, and I'm using Bing because this is pretty much all being scrubbed from Google, it's even getting hard to find the kill room Instagram post using Bing. Now, this one is so low res, it's pretty much useless. Here's a good one, though. I can actually read these. Hashtag kill room. Just rinse it off when you're done. Jimmy Comet posted hashtag murder. Now, Wilfred, for right-minded thinking people and Christians who discover information like this, it's no wonder people wanted an investigation. And CNN brought Jimmy Comet, brought James Alefantis on, or was it Fox News? Fox News brought James Alefantis on and did a softball interview where they just lamented how he was being unfairly persecuted and how does that make you feel and how are you holding up. They didn't ask any of these questions about the Instagram page. So to your point, it just seems that those who are connected to powerful people who may be involved in really sinister things like this, they're protected by the mainstream media too, not only in the UK but also in the United States. And it's very, very disheartening. It's very demoralizing for those of us in the world, Wilfred, who want to see justice served. There's so precious little of it.
Yes, unfortunately, the mainstream media is becoming a propaganda tool of the Satanists. Not all the mainstream media, but a lot of them. I would say probably more than 50% of them are basically tools of the Satanists. And it's very disturbing and has very disturbing consequences for democracy, because the media is supposed to be a guardian of democracy, not a destroyer of it. But that's what we get when the Satanists have so much influence in the media. Probably we have a case that some of these VIPs involved in SRA are themselves owners of parts of the mainstream media. So we need to look at alternatives for our information, which is where the alternative media comes in. But I'm very concerned, as I'm sure you are, at some of the attempts now to try and restrict what is shown on the internet more. And there's a certain degree of policing going on of what is put on the internet. But let's make the best of it while we still have it, to put the message out, because people more than ever before are open, I believe, to learning more about the Satanists and SRA and who actually is pulling the strings in their society. For Christians as a church, we need to be light in the darkness, which means also exposing the darkness. That's why God gave me the verse, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, expose the deeds of darkness. We need to expose the deeds of darkness. That is part of the battle. You could even say it's half the battle, because the Satanists only grow stronger when they remain hidden. And when we bring them to the light, as the Hampstead case did for a while, then they really have to do a cover-up. The only satanic panic that occurs when these things happen is the Satanists panicking because they're about to be fully exposed. And this is what we have to keep trying to do. It is increasingly happening with the help of the alternative media. We are increasingly getting the word out there. People are starting to wake up. What people can do is take interviews like this and other interviews that tell the truth about SRA and circulate them far and wide among all their contacts. They should be doing this. Pass the message on, pass the word on. I think people are more open than before, because of the COVID-19 problem, to hearing about these issues and learning about what's actually going on in their governments and with their politicians. Unfortunately, I understand, or my understanding is that Satanism and SRA have gotten to the top of the American political spectrum and is especially prevalent, but not only there, in the Democratic Party. It's something that we need to be very aware of, especially with your US election coming up soon, because of this huge degree of Satanist infiltration in the left of the political spectrum in the US. But I'm not saying be complacent about the right. I wouldn't be surprised if the right also has some infiltrators, but they're nowhere as packed with Satanist influence at the moment as the left is.
Yeah. Do you agree that, and I'm going off track here just a little bit because we're talking about the left, because I wanted to wrap this up by talking about intelligence agencies and the Epstein case and how glaringly obvious it is now that child sex trafficking and pedophilia and horrible activities like that are tied in with blackmailing people, so the intelligence agencies play a part. But do you agree that the Democrats do seem to be beholden to what I have described as the spirit of the Antichrist, because they worship at the altar of abortion? I just think that it can't be overstated how ritualistic, Moloch level of evil abortion is, and these people cheer. In the New York House, Wilfred, they cheered when it was passed, when the law was passed to allow for abortion in the 9th month. They applauded and cheered.
Yes.
So to me, that's just spirit of the Antichrist, which might explain why these people won't condemn BLM, a Marxist organization, marching and looting in cities, and Antifa doing the same. But your thoughts on that? Abortion, is it a satanic ritual?
I have said on many occasions that abortion is the modern day version of child sacrifice. Abortion is satanic sacrifice. And I know that the former Satanist Zachary King, who left Satanism and became a Roman Catholic, he has blown the whistle big time on Satanist involvement with abortion. He has admitted that when he was a Satanist, they would go into abortion clinics to do their rituals at the end of the day and offer up all the aborted babies to the devil, and that he himself had undertaken ritual abortions where the aborted babies were offered up to the devil as well. Abortion is something very close to the heart of Satanists. In the US, more blatantly so than in the UK, Satanists will turn up at abortion clinic demonstrations and act as counter demonstrators against the pro-life demonstrators. And they will do this openly, not a big secret. Satanist support for abortion is very clear-cut and very open, and so is the support for abortion by the Democrats. They believe, the Satanists believe, they will get power from all this blood sacrifice of the children, that it pleases the devil and they will get more power from that. Black Lives Matter, so-called, it's a misleading name because frankly, I don't believe for a second that Black Lives Matter actually cares about Black lives. I believe they only care about pushing their left-wing Satanist agenda across the country, using Black lives as an excuse or a banner, a convenient banner to do that. They have openly admitted they contact spirits of the dead, which any Christian will know who has basic knowledge about these things, are demons. They're not real spirits of the dead. They are talking to demons. And they are engaging in this witchcraft to commune with demons and are quite open about that, pushing a Satanist agenda. And they are also pushing a Satanist New World Order agenda. All these labels that we hear, Marxist, socialist, cultural Marxist, deep state, at the core of them, at the core belief system they have, which they will always cling on to, is Satanism. Their methods may be Marxist, because Marxist methods can be quite effective, but their real belief system that they're trying to promote and advance is Satanism, because they are preparing the world, or trying to prepare the world, for the coming of the Antichrist, the rise of the Antichrist. One clear example of this was in the summer of this year, around the time, just before the summer solstice. Satanists were calling for and organizing rallies, calling for the setting up of one world government. There were many rallies of this kind in the USA, and there were rallies of this type in other countries as well, all organized by Satanists, openly calling for the setting up of one world government. The Satanists know that the time of their false Messiah rising is coming, and they're trying to speed it up by pushing for one world government. COVID-19 has been a convenient excuse for some senior leaders to call for one world government. I know that the UK former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has publicly called for the setting up of one world government to deal with global crises such as COVID-19. And frankly, it won't be long before they also do the same. I think to some extent they've already done it, call for one world government to deal with the so-called climate change crisis. So all these things are becoming useful tools to push the world, whether they like it or not, towards globalism, towards global government, the so-called New World Order, which is Satanist at its core. So when you see things like New World Order, deep state, one world government, cultural Marxism, all these paths lead back to the same thing, Satanism. Because the Satanists know that they have to do these things to prepare for the rise of the Antichrist. I interviewed a few years ago a former senior Satanist leader in the UK who worked closely with top Satanist leaders. She eventually became a Christian and left Satanism. And she said to me, I asked her very clearly, were you and your colleagues preparing for the coming of the Antichrist? And she said, yes, with such certainty and clarity, as if she was saying to me, what else do you think we would be doing? We sometimes don't make that connection. We think that Satanists are just like, doing evil for evil's sake. They have a system, they have an agenda, they have a global agenda that we need to wake up to, which is the coming of the Antichrist. They have to prepare society for that, and they will be the ones, the Antichrist's soldiers, so to speak, who will enforce his rules, his draconian rules over the world when he comes to power. They are the ones also preparing his way. He is their false Messiah, who will be coming probably sooner than we think, as will Jesus Christ be returning sooner than we think. But are we prepared? Are we ready to oppose this evil? Are we ready to oppose what the Satanists are doing? Are we ready to see through all their camouflage, all the different labels and names they use? I have no doubt that many of the political leaders in the West today know exactly what they're doing, know that they're preparing for the rise of the Antichrist, and are doing what they're doing for that purpose, because they themselves are Satanists. Look, for example, at the opening of the Gotthard Tunnel in Europe, and you will see a blatant Satanist ceremony in the presence of at least 3 top European political leaders from 3 different countries. And they didn't bat an eyelid. It was just like business as usual. Oh, there's a big Satanist ceremony. Okay, that's fine. And that's where we've got to. That's how far it has reached. Now, it's not too late to oppose it. It's not too late to do the right thing, to speak out, to try and protect children. But if we keep being passive in the face of this evil, then a time will come when it will be too late. And I believe that God considers as sin not just what we actively do, but also what the good that we know we ought to do or we should be doing and we fail to do. And there's been too much passivity in the face of SRA. There's been too much passivity in the face of Satanism, which is why they've managed to grow so powerful and influential today. Because the church has either been too passive, indifferent, or scared to deal with this issue. Now, there is a growing awakening in the public and in the church, but it's slow. And sometimes some of the people who try and stop the church from learning about these things are themselves church leaders. But they don't make the connection. They don't realize that we're in the end times, that Satanism and SRA is not just a child protection issue, although it is a very crucial child protection issue. And that's how I started off on this issue. It is also an end times issue because the groundwork is being steadily laid by the Satanists for the events of the rise of the Antichrist to power and what comes straight after that until Christ returns. Are we going to follow God's commandments and do what we ought to be doing, like the Good Samaritan, being the Good Samaritan to all those people being victimized by SRA? Or are we just going to be like the Pharisee and the Levite in the parable of the Good Samaritan and look the other way? And I think that's the challenge to us today, what are you going to do about it? God has put us here in this time in history for a purpose. Are we going to fulfill that purpose, or are we just going to act as if we're perpetual bystanders?
Right. No, I agree. You know, it's been said, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. And I think you're right. I think a lot of these people in positions of political power at the highest levels are Satanists, because it is the only thing that explains their anti-human behaviors, their anti-human policies, UN Agenda 2030 policies, carbon taxes for bankers. We need a one-world government, right? Completely satanic, and the only way these people could stand for these policies, in my view, is if they were Satanists. So I think we're right over the target here, Wilfred, and maybe next time we get together we can talk about intelligence agencies and that whole connection to child sex trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. We're running a little short on time today, but again, as I started the interview, this topic's so huge we could talk for 3 hours and still only be scratching the surface.
Yes, that's true.
I really do appreciate your time. It's just been a pleasure to meet you. The website, guys, is casra.org.uk, and that is the Coalition Against Satanist Ritual Abuse. If any of you need help, personally, if you've experienced anything regarding this issue and need some help, I think you can reach out to Wilfred directly via that website, correct?
Yes, yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Is there any way we can support you and support your work?
If anyone is interested in giving to the work, they can contact me through that website, and I'll provide some details on how they can give. Likewise, if anyone wants more information on this subject, they can contact me through their website. The important thing is to spread the word, spread the information, spread interviews like this around. So I encourage people to help by informing others. We all have different social circles and networks that we move in. Use your social network to get the message out. Use your social network to try and raise people's awareness. There will always be some diehard skeptics, but there will also be a lot of people who I believe will appreciate this information and want to know more. So we are moving in a more positive direction now as compared to, say, 15 years ago on this subject. Let's keep the momentum going by sharing the word around and passing around links to these interviews.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks for being a voice of light in the world, Wilfred. We very much appreciate your time and your Christian perspective. I think you're preaching to the choir here, so it's my hope that people listening will spread this interview far and wide. If you guys want to re-upload this to your own channels, feel free. I don't normally say that, but this is such important information. It does need to be spread as quickly and as far as possible. Our guest has been Wilfred Wong. Wilfred, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and friends, thank you so much for tuning in. A special shout out to our patrons who are keeping us in the fight for truth. God love you guys. Thanks for checking us out at sgtreport.tv for weekly exclusive content. That same exclusive content is also posted on my Patreon page. God bless you guys. And for real news 24/7, visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless. Bye-bye.